Chapter 1. The Threshold. There are moments in the year when the world holds its breath, when everything that has been and everything that will be meet at a single point, a hinge upon which the entire future turns. For the Gaelic peoples of Ireland and Scotland, one of those moments came in early May, when winter's death grip finally loosened, and the possibility of survival shifted from desperate hope to reasonable expectation. They called it Beltane, and it mattered more than we, with our grocery stores and central heating, can easily comprehend. To understand Beltane, you must first understand what spring meant to a pastoral people living at the edge of the habitable world. Winter wasn't merely inconvenient, it was a gauntlet you ran, hoping to reach the other side with your family and livestock intact. Every animal that died in the cold was protein lost, wealth diminished, next year's breeding stock depleted. Every human who didn't survive to May was a worker gone, a family member mourned, a hole in the community's fabric that might never be repaired. The earliest textual evidence we have, and this is crucial, because with Beltane, we're dealing with fragments and reconstructions, not comprehensive ritual manuals, comes from early medieval Irish sources. Learned glossaries, the kind compiled by monks and scholars who were trying to preserve and explain their language and heritage, even as Christianity was transforming their world. One of these, Cormac's Glossary, describes Beltane explicitly: fires made with incantations, cattle driven between them for protection. But even more telling is a formula preserved in Old Irish narrative, the year divided cleanly in two. Summer from Beltane to Samhain, winter from Samhain to Beltane. This wasn't ornamental poetry. This was fundamental reality. The world had two modes, the time when things grew and the time when things died. Beltane was the moment of transition between them. Think about what that meant in practical terms. Beltane marked the point when you could finally move your cattle from their winter shelters to the upland pastures. Those animals had been confined, fed on stored fodder, slowly weakening through the dark months. Now, if you'd calculated correctly, if you'd stored enough feed, if disease hadn't swept through your herd, if the winter hadn't been unusually harsh, you could drive them up to the fresh grass of the high country. They would fatten, the cows would calve, the sheep would lamb. Milk would flow again in quantities that allowed for butter and cheese, for abundance instead of mere subsistence. But, and this is where the ritual comes in, that transition was dangerous. Moving livestock was always risky. Predators lurked. Disease could strike. The journey itself could kill weak animals. And beyond the practical dangers, there were forces that defied easy explanation. The mysterious sicknesses that could devastate a herd overnight. The inexplicable misfortunes that struck some households and spared others. The sense that the world contained powers that needed to be negotiated with, appeased, honored. So Beltane wasn't simply the day we move the cattle. It was the day you performed the rituals that would protect the cattle during the move and throughout the vulnerable summer months. It was the day you acknowledged that survival wasn't guaranteed. That forces beyond your control shaped your fate, and that the correct performance of traditional rites might tip the balance in your favor. The timing itself was significant. Early May in Ireland and Scotland is a liminal period. Winter is clearly ending, But summer hasn't fully arrived. The weather is unpredictable. You might have warm sunshine one day and killing frost the next. The landscape is transforming rapidly. Bare branches suddenly foaming with leaf and blossom, the brown earth erupting into green. Streams swelling with snowmelt, the light lengthening noticeably with each passing day. It's a threshold time, a between time. And humans have always understood, at some deep instinctive level, that thresholds are dangerous. That the moment of transition, when you're neither here nor there, is when you're most vulnerable, but also when you're closest to forces that normally remain hidden. When the veil between the everyday world and the other world grows thin. The Gaelic Cosmos was full of boundaries that mattered, between land and sea, between cultivated field and wild forest, between the human settlement and the space beyond it. Beltane was a temporal boundary of the same kind, and it required the same kind of careful negotiation. You couldn't just stumble through it carelessly. You had to mark it, acknowledge it, perform the correct actions at the correct time, in the correct manner. This is why fire became central to Beltane. Not just any fire, ritual fire, made with intention, blessed with specific words, used for specific purposes. Fire was transformative. It consumed and purified. It drove back darkness and cold. It was, in its own way, a piece of the sun brought down to earth, controllable, useful, powerful. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The point to grasp here is that Beltane existed at the intersection of desperate practical need and profound spiritual significance. It was the hinge between death and life, between scarcity and potential plenty, between the closed world of winter and the opening world of summer. Everything that followed, the fires, the offerings, the communal feasting, the protective rituals, grew from this fundamental truth. If you got Beltane right, if you performed the traditional rites correctly, if you honored the powers that shaped the world, then perhaps, you would make it through another year. Your cattle would thrive, your fields would yield, your children would survive to see the next Beltane. And if you got it wrong, well, there was always next year, assuming you lived that long. The threshold was before you. The fires were being kindled. The cattle were lowing, restless, sensing the change coming. And the people of the Gaelic world, practical and mystical in equal measure, prepared to step across that boundary between winter and summer, between death and life, between the world as it had been and the world as it might become.